Look, the optics for the moment are good. The big question that no one understands and no one knows is, what does Putin want, right? In other words, we're dealing with somebody who is very hard to predict what his actual goals are, what he's planning to do. He's a rational actor, but he's rational within his own set of goals. So much of this has to be looked upon from domestic Russian politics and Putin's need to maintain power, and doing this in a situation where his economy is not doing well, where COVID has hit Russia harder than I think any other country in the world in terms of per capita deaths, or very high to almost anyone in the world. I think in absolute numbers, they have the highest number of deaths in the world right now. So the reality is Russia is in deep trouble, and that means Putin is not doing well. So the question is, is this a traditional means of changing the topic, getting away from domestic and showing, okay, let's become nationalists, only I can take on the United States, only I can reclaim the rightful power of the Russia, the traditional Russia that included Ukraine once upon a time? We do not know. How far is he willing to go? We don't know. Keeping in mind the fact that the economy of Russia is smaller than the economy of Italy. So we're not talking about a strong country. We're not talking about China right now. I mean, yes, in terms of military, he has nuclear weapons, and he's rebuilt his military to a large extent. Not in any which way that if he ever had to take on the United States, he could. But the reality is he could create a tremendous amount of damage. And the question is, does anyone have the will to stand up to him militarily? And that's a really big question. As long as he thinks that there's a possibility they might, he's most likely not going to invade Ukraine.
You feel that those reassurances were provided? There were strong words provided by Biden here towards Ukraine.
There's no question about that in terms of the economic things he do, etc. But, you know, maybe Putin doesn't care, right? Sanctions, I think the Russians, if I'm not mistaken, has something near $700 billion in reserves right now. They've built up their reserves to a very high level, so they can deal pretty well with sanctions. They're still, you know, Europe is dependent on them for gas. They're oil producers. The price of oil has gone back up. So maybe he can say, I'll get away with it, you know? I mean, there'll be sanctions for a couple of weeks, couple of months, even a couple of years, but I'll get back Ukraine. I'll be remembered in history as the Russian leader who got back Ukraine. So I don't know. I think much of the world is living in a world of uncertainty. Let's keep in mind the fact that Ukraine is a separate country. Ukraine has a separate history. The Ukrainians do not want to be part of Russia, period. They never wanted to be part of Russia, period. During World War II, we saw that, for better or for worse. The Ukrainians have fought with the Nazis, frankly. So the reality is it's a complicated situation. I think Biden is doing the best he can. I think he has limitations, including the fact that Americans are weary of war. You know, for those of us people in Israel are saying, well, the United States will step in terms of Iran. Americans weary of war. They don't want to fight in Ukraine. They don't want to fight in Iran. They don't want to fight at this point. And we need to keep that in mind in general. And that I'm sure Putin knows that as well.
Might the sought concessions from the U.S. have to do with the Middle East as well? How far does this go? We're seeing the U.S. interest seemingly fade from the Middle East. Is that a region that Russia is looking to perhaps leverage this?
To a small degree. Look, Russia tries to leverage wherever it can. That's the Putin doctrine. Wherever we can leverage a little bit of power, wherever we can create a certain amount of discontent, we will leverage it and try to move forward wherever he can. Look, the United States, since the period of time of President Obama, has been slowly pulling back to some extent. And the United States has not had internally a strategic discussion of saying, what's the position of the United States in the world? What do we want to be? And the reality is that it's a tired country. And the rest of the world understands that. At least in Europe, they understand that America is a tired country. They're not looking the same way to America as they used to, but it's still a very strong country. And so